Greetings to the Old Testament interpretation class here at Southeastern University. This is your instructor, Dr. Larry Asplund, coming to you at the very beginning. I wanted to do a couple of things for you tonight. First of all, welcome you to the beginning of our 8-week intensive. As you know, if you had an 8-week online course before, it comes and goes rather quickly. So I want to give you just a general introduction to our class and then specifically home in on week 1 and what we're going to need to do together this coming week. First of all, our course description is that the course serves as an introduction to Old Testament interpretation. So it's not the same thing as an Old Testament survey class, for instance. It's really designed to focus on issues of introduction and, of course, ultimately issues of interpretation. And that means application in our own specific contexts as well. It provides an elemental framework for interpreting the Old Testament by exploring its ancient Near Eastern context, discussing literary, thematic, and theological constructs, and demonstrating how it informs Christian thought and practice. All of that is to say, you know, the Old Testament, so what? Why is it meaningful to us, and how should we approach it when it comes to our own understanding of Christian faith? And in some cases, perhaps the need or the opportunity to teach or to preach when it comes to the Old Testament. Learning outcomes for our class, first of all, number 1, to demonstrate a basic understanding of the canon, including its formation, transmission, and reliability as Scripture. The canon, of course, is the 39 books of the Old Testament that we have in our Bible. Number 2, to explain the process of Old Testament interpretation and how to employ basic research tools. So there'll be a little bit, you know, this is not a graduate course per se, but there will be some introduction to research issues when it comes to our use of the Old Testament. Number 3, to identify the ancient Near Eastern culture, historical and geographic context that inform biblical interpretation. As you well know, the Old Testament books were not written well in 21st century America. There's a vast gulf culturally between us and those original contexts. It's really important that we take some time to consider, you know, the original audience and what it is they were hearing when God's revelation was being given to them in the Old Testament. Number 4, to recognize genres of the Old Testament and how they inform interpretation. Of course, a literary genre is a literary style. So we'd have a little bit of a different approach to reading, for instance, Hebrew poetry as compared to Old Testament law, prophetic literature, etc. And then number 5, to identify key themes, unique characteristics, and theological constructs of the Old Testament that inform our Christian faith. So we want to be able to build bridges from the Old Testament into our own context as Christ followers. So how do we get started? First of all, in the course information section of our Brightspace course site, you want to take a look at the course syllabus. First of all, if you're like me, you want to download a copy, have it handy, you know, so you can refer to it often. Instructor information gives you a little bit of background about myself. And then there is the Meet the Class discussion forum. You know, it's very important since we're going to be doing, as you will see, a lot of work together. So much of our class will be collaborative, interactive, dynamic in that kind of a way. And so the more time we take to connect with each other, you know, the more enjoyable, but the more valuable and beneficial this course will be. So jump into the Meet the Class discussion forum if you have not already do so. Introduce yourself and then interact with the other students who are jumping in. We have students, because it's online, from all over, so it's just very, very interesting to be able to make those connections here at the beginning. Also, in the course resources section, under Getting Started, you have the introductory video by Dr. Megan Musey. Dr. Musey is the course developer for this course, which means that I take my hat off to her for all the hard work she did to put everything in place for our benefit and for our enjoyment. So you have a video. You also have a transcript really of that video called Studying the Old Testament Well. And then there's also kind of an instructional video for us. The SEU online discussion forums and introduction gives us a sense of expectation, a little bit of a start on doing well when it comes to our discussion forums. Our assigned textbook for the class is Old Testament Today by John Walton and Andrew Hill, a really great reference. Is one of those books that you'll want to keep handy in your library, one that you can refer to often, and we'll jump into it. You're not going to read the whole book, but we'll jump into it at key points and enjoy immensely the contribution it will make. And of course, you will see that there's a vast variety of other resources that are given to us. Again, Dr. Musey has done a great job putting together links to videos and articles and blog posts and a variety of things that will be very, very helpful for us. Also, in terms of accessing the weekly content folders, there are a couple of items. I don't want you to be confused by them. They're not graded assignments. They are just ways for us to kind of get into, to access, the website. So the SEU Student Acknowledgement is a 7-question quiz. It really is one of those things that gives you an opportunity to review some key policies for us at Southeastern University. And then there is the Essential Information Survey, which just, asks questions that are basically about your background, etc. So you need to complete these. They won't take very long, but they are, having completed them is what will give you access to week 1 and week 2, etc. And so just go ahead and jump in and do that. Remember, they're not graded assignments, but they are relevant in terms of providing background for the class. Course requirements, I don't want to say too much about this at the beginning, but I do want to give you a basic kind of a general sense of the work that you will be doing. Discussion forums, there are a large number of them. As you know, there are 5 weeks when we will actually have 2 discussions. Each of our discussion forums will be worth 5 points each, and that means that it will be a total of 15% of our final grade. And they're going to be great opportunities just to jump in and reply to a discussion question, and then to interact with each other, to carry on a conversation about some of the things that we're learning. Then there'll be very short quizzes that will be 10 points each. In fact, there are 4 weeks when there will be 2 quizzes. They will be worth 25% of your final grade. And again, I'll be talking about them as we go forward. Then in week 7, there's a research project that really involves a worksheet, and there is a research presentation. Also the project 15%, the presentation 5%. There's not going to be a research paper per se, but there will be. It's a way of introducing you to some research ideas and some research resources for you in the Old Testament. The big piece, of course, is in week 8. The final exam will be 40% of your grade, and I'll probably start talking about that early, just so you have a sense of what's involved. We have set up at Southeastern University a kind of a secure way of doing exams online, and it creates a couple of extra steps, but I know you will appreciate the security and the integrity of the exam as a result. It's coming up at the end, so there'll be plenty of time to get ready for that. So week 1, all of our weeks are going to be divided into 3 different pieces. The week 1 aim, first of all, defines our learning objectives for our first week. It is, number 1, to recognize the relationship between Yahweh and Israel. That's the Lord, of course. Number 2, it's our class introductions, which have already begun. And number 3 is to identify the basics of the canon, those 39 books, and how the Old Testament informs Christian faith, its relevance. And so that's our objective in week 1. Also, the idea is for us to establish a baseline of our knowledge and our understanding of the Old Testament in the first week. And so, we're asking these questions. What is the Old Testament? Why does it matter? And why and how should we study it? So we're jumping in, getting started in week 1 as we go forward in this class. Then the week 1 section called Learn. There are learning resources that are most significant when it comes to your learning in week 1. First of all, to read Nehemiah 9. verses 5 to 38, the great prayer of Nehemiah, which kind of summarizes really the idea of the Old Testament. Also, to create a Zondervan textbook plus account, all that will do is give you access to additional resources related to our textbook. And I know you will enjoy the ability to access those additional resources. Then there are 3 very important videos. One is called Why Do We Need the Old Testament by John Oswalt. There's a video listed Studying the Old Testament Well from Dr. Musey. That's the one you've already seen in the introduction, in the class introduction. It's given to us there again in week 1. And then there's a video from the Bible Project called What is the Bible? So those are resources that you have links to in week 1. And then there's a list, some great supplementary resources. I love this list, and I love the fact that we're given access to so many very, very high quality resources in terms of articles and videos and so forth. So there's an article from Christopher Peters called Do We Need the Old Testament? A great conversation between Bill Arnold and Ben Witherington called Christians in the Old Testament. A blog post from the Bible Project called 3 Easy Ways to Engage with the Bible, and then a really great a video from Craig Keener called The Continuity Between Old Testament and New Testament, which is just a fascinating idea. And of course, Craig Keener is just a great scholar. So it's a wonderful opportunity for us to really have access to these resources. So in terms of assignments to do in week 1, it's the week 1 section called Apply. First of all, there is the Old Testament interpretation pre-test. It's a 4-credit assignment, but ungraded, so it's not going to affect your grade. You know, when it comes to pre-test as an assessment, it's really designed to create a sense of what our students, what you all kind of know coming into the class when it comes to the Old Testament. Then when we come to the end, we can kind of measure what you've learned, the extent to which you know more as a result of taking the class. So it's important. Do take it seriously, even though it's ungraded, because it's very valuable information for me and for us in the School of Ministry and Theology at Southeastern. Then your very first discussion forum. After watching the 3 videos in that Learning Resources section, respond to this question: why is the study of the Old Testament important for Christian faith? So it's a basic kind of an introductory question. Remember to post your initial response by 11:59 p.m. on Saturday, and then reply to at least 2 other students by 11:59 p.m. on Tuesday. I hope you'll view it as a conversation, as well as an opportunity to interact and get to know other of the great students in this class as a result of this kind of assignment. Remember, there's kind of an introductory document which gives you a sense of expectations when it comes to these discussion forums. So the whole idea of the Old Testament, which is, when you think about it, 76% of the Bible. Some have said that really the New Testament is an interpretation of the Old Testament in the light of Christ. It's an application of the Old Testament in the light of Christ. Many of the documents in the Old Testament assume that we know the Old Testament background. So being able to take advantage of this opportunity, this learning experience this semester, just to jump in and get our feet a little bit wet when it comes to the Old Testament, is going to be very, very beneficial. So I'm looking forward to sharing this time with you. Please know that I am here, committed to you. I'm here to serve you. Never hesitate to let me know if you have a question or if you hit a bump along the way. I will do everything I can, since I'm committed to you and to your learning in this class. So God bless you, everybody. You'll be in my prayers every day this week. Just have a wonderful first week.